Welcome to BNEWS Weekly Special Report, 2016 Year in Review. I'm Phil Gallagher, along with my guest, Burlington Town Administrator John Petrin. Welcome to the program, John.
Thank you, Phil. Once again, we do this on a yearly basis. So, Merry Christmas to all, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. John is a graduate of Stonehill with a undergraduate degree in poli-sci, and he's a graduate of Northeastern University with a master's degree in public administration.
Correct, yes.
And he is completing his 5th year as the Burlington Town Administrator. Relatively uneventful in terms of trauma and catastrophe. Let's start out with just a general question from your perspective, the year in review in terms of highs and lows, accomplishments and disappointments.
Well, Burlington's a great place to be. So, we're in very good position here. I consider ourselves at the top of the hill, so we're the kings at the top of the hill to be knocked off. You look at what we have in this community from a services viewpoint. So from my side, at looking at things from the municipal side, we do quite well. We're fortunate. We were talking before we went on air about some of our employees, and we've got a great group of people here, that work for us, and it's a great community to be in. And it really is a community. I mean, Burlington people care about each other, so it's a great place to be. So we've had a very good year this past year. We closed out our books in very good shape. Free cash is in very good order, and our budgets are in good order. So we're doing things quite well. Disappointments are more, things are slow, to get things moving. We've been talking about public works garage, fire station, those type of things, and that takes time because one of the things we have problems with here is land, is having available options for us, to build. So I think that's maybe on the slow side. But on the positive side, I can talk about that all day.
Right. And well, we'll get into some specific questions on the capital budget side. But let's talk about water. Water was a big issue this year. We were down. We had John Sanchez on earlier during the peak of the drought in terms of the both the reduction in the capacity of the reservoir, as well as new EPA regulations relative to contaminants. Where are we now? What's the future? Are we going to be, is this going to be a perennial problem from a water standpoint in terms of restrictions? Are we going to be a net water importer?
Yes, so it's going to be a perennial problem. As I think everybody knows, in eastern Massachusetts, particularly in this part of Massachusetts, we are still in a severe drought condition. So the state has us classified, as that. We're probably there for a few years. So water is difficult. It's more difficult in this town because several reasons. One is capacity, but on the other hand, we've actually decreased our potable water usage, but we've increased our total water usage because of irrigation systems. So, we've done a great job. We're one of the few communities that, where the households on average are below the recommended guidelines for water usage. So we do very well there. But with the addition of the irrigation systems, the proliferation of irrigation systems, water is being used at a much higher rate. I remember 30 years ago, nobody watered grass. Now it is a requirement for some of these homes, that they keep their grass green, and that is testing our system. So we're not, so that's the real issue, along with water being scarce. And Massachusetts had that issue for years.
Now, one of the arguments from the residents is, hey, we have these restrictions. Our lawns are burnt out. We got dust in the front yard, but we don't see any restrictions on the business community. And in fact, we're continually adding more and more large water users.
So we are not actually. So when you look at the usage, when we put the details out there, the residents, it's staying the same level. So even though, we're increasing residential homes, in the community, and we're increasing businesses, But the businesses that we are creating are not high water users. They're not manufacturing facilities.
Right. But
so
are restaurants high water users?
A little bit, but not as much as you would think. So, and you know, they're not as high as a manufacturer who uses water as part of the process.
PC board manufacturer, something like
exactly, where water is very much part of that. So when you look at it, our residential usage rate to the commercial rate is staying the same, you know, for the most part. Where we're going up is in that summer usage is the irrigation systems. So we're putting out, you know, on average less than 3 million gallons. In the winter, we jumped to 5.5 million in the summer, and there's only one reason for that, and that's outdoor usage.
Right. Now, what about inflow and infiltration? That's the sewer problem where you either get inflow from manholes that are loose and water sewer pipes that are loose, and infiltration is through the cracks in the pipes, etc. We haven't had a surcharging event in a number of years. Is this fully under control? Did the bypass?
It's in very good shape, you know. So all the techniques that were used, you know, over the last 10 to 15 years to improve that I&I water, you know, the storm water infiltrating, you know, the regular water, that has, you know, we've really hit the major areas, and our piping is in, you know, better shape in some areas, and it's something we work at on replacing piping and those types of things, working with homeowners, you know, so that they're not discharging water into,
from the sump
you know,
pumps,
from the sump pumps. So a lot of work has been done on that. So yes, things have certainly improved. There's always room for improvement, but we've really cut into that problem over the last 10 to 15 years.
Now, the main sewer trunk that left from Terrace Hall, it used to go through the well field, it now goes around the well field. Is that complete now from Terrace Hall down to the Woburn?
It's complete to the Woburn line. So what we're looking to do now, town meeting 2 years ago appropriated funds for us to do the next section of the line, which is actually through Horn Pond in Woburn, and that project is out, and I believe that's being done this year in Woburn. So that'll be the next section, you know, so that our line is in very good shape on the major trunk line going out.
Now, why are we contributing to that if it's in Woburn?
Because it's our stuff that goes through the line, and so that section really is mostly our stuff that goes through. So because we're putting the wear and tear on the lines, it's our responsibility. And that's what happens with these things all through. It's not an MWRA line. It's a Woburn city-owned line. So we work with them on that issue.
It's a regional issue.
It's a regional issue. We, you know, under the rules and guidelines, that's our ownership for the problem, even though they own the pipes. So that's why we had to appropriate the money. We've transferred the money to the city of Woburn. They have put out for that project to, you know, to get done, and it will get done.
Okay, they're supervising the spending of our money, though.
They're our neighbor. You know, we'll say nice things about Woburn today.
Of course,
you know,
we will. Absolutely.
You know, and you know,
we have great
we work
with
well.
Woburn.
We do.
We do.
You know, work well with Mayor Galvin. I'm talking to him, you know, from time to time, and we work well. Our departments work well: police, public works, fire. We have, you know, so no, we're, you know, they're a sister city, you know, so we'll treat them as nice. So I'll be nice today.
Now, I skipped over. I meant to ask you a question about the administrative team. Give us some examples. So I know we have very little turnover there.
Oh, yes.
You know, who are the players that you rely on a daily basis in terms
well,
of the
of
administration?
course, the larger departments are, you know, in any community: police, fire, and public works. So we have Chief Michael Kent in the police department. So, you know, he's chief now maybe 7 years here, and I think you remember he was, you know, he came in from the Amherst Police Department, and you know, great addition. Chief Yetman is a Burlington firefighter, you know, rose through the ranks to chief, and John Sanchez came to us, you know, from being a regional. Bill Ricker, and then Arlington, you know, as Public Works Director. You know, Paul Sagarino's Assistant Town Administrator and Town Accountant. Joanne Faust is HR Director. You know, and then there's another 15 departments. You know, we have. Brian Curtin as the
Amy
elected
Warfield.
treasurer, Amy Warfield, elected town clerk. So you look at that, and that team hasn't changed over since I've been here. And I was fortunate, you know, and I saw Bob Mercier this week and thanked him once again for, you know, leaving behind a great team to work with. And that's what I say. And you know, people think, oh, you're just a town administrator, you need to say those things. No, I speak from the heart when I speak, and when I say we've got a great team of people working for us all up and down the chain, we do. We got employees who care.
Right. And then tangentially, the relationship between the town and the school department, which can be fractious in various communities.
In some places. I work very well with Eric Conti as school superintendent. You know, he's been here a long time now, too. Still a young man. And
like you and
yeah,
like you and I.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's younger than us, so we can say he's a young man.
That's
okay?
right.
So he's younger and does a great job there. And you know, his team and our team have a great relationship, you know, in talking. So, you know, it's not that we always agree, but we know where we're coming from, and we can speak to each other, and we can call each other and say, hey, you know, what's going on this? And that happens.
Well, particularly on the budget. I mean, particularly capital spending and a budget, who's going to get what share.
Yeah.
And that seems to have gone quite smoothly over the past couple of years.
It has. It's, and as we were at Ways and Means 2 weeks ago, and as the chair said, it's a blended budget, you know, and because he's got to keep making his point, you know, schools, you know, might rise a little faster than general government, but it is a blended budget, and we understand that as we go through the process. So, you know, the last few years when we get to town meeting, there has been no arguments going into town meeting. We've worked, the Selectmen School Committee and Ways and Means has worked as a team to determine, you know, where we need to be as a community.
I know any bumps prior to?
You know, it's a $130 million budget. You're going to have discussions. As long as those discussions are known, and as long as I'm telling you, you know, before I say it outside, and that happens here. So it's a very good relationship, you know, across the board.
Okay, let's talk about capital spending. You have a number of, I wouldn't say problems, but outstanding issues. We have the bank building, which $1 million plus was appropriated. That's the one on the central campus. Then we have the Clark and Reed building, which we have acquired, which is laying fallow at this point. And then we have some discussions on the salt shed.
Say it 3 times fast.
Yeah, bring us up to speed on those 3 items.
So where we stand on those in the last 2 years, so we have the money appropriated for what we call 33 Center Street, the old bank building, and the Human Services building. Those plans are being finalized in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and those will go out to bid in a January, February timeframe. As you know, we had tried to bid, and we had bid it once, and the bids were way too high, so we redid the project. So that'll be going out to bid very shortly. So town meeting had approved those funds this past year. So we're moving forward to take that plan. And we're hoping within 18 months that, those 2 buildings will be completed.
Well, so 33 is a retrofit, a complete retrofit from a banking form of usage. What component of the appropriation is for Center School or the Human Services building?
So 3.1 million, I think we did for Human Services building, and really that is retrofitting the 2nd floor. And updating the systems in that building. So what will happen is that on the 2nd floor, Council on Aging will have several new rooms for spacing, you know, that they can do programming. The big issue in that building has been space, you know, because we have Youth and Family Services, Board of Health, Veterans, and Recreation, and COA in that building, and every square inch is being used. So by retrofitting 33 Center Street, we can move the Youth and Family Services out and put them there, and then reduce space, you know, for additional programming space in 61 in the Human Services building, and reduce some of the systems that need to be upgraded. You know, the heating systems need to be upgraded.
Well, that's a WPA building. I think was built in '36.
I think you're right. You know, so it goes back.
35 years ago,
you know,
was
high school and retrofitted and. I guess there was a fire in it at one point. And then
we completed the retrofit, and 2 weeks before the ribbon cutting, it burned down. So that's it's had a long an adventurous life.
So it hasn't been retrofitted in 25, 30 years, you know, since the last time. So we're updating systems. The building's in still very good shape. So we're updating, you know, the heating system and cooling system and respacing some walls, you know, and, you know, so we can have the space there. Right. So that's that project. Fire Station 2, you know, we've approved to be torn down and rebuilt on the site. On the same site. So the committee's been working on that, and we've hired our architect, Donovan Sweeney will be our architect. We have a meeting in 2 weeks to review with them the goals, you know, of the building and start that, you know, the actual engineering and architectural work of that building. So we're moving forward on that. And then Clark and Reed is, you know, the Public Works. You know, what we're looking at is what to do with Public Works. Yeah. The selectmen are meeting on that issue now, so that's the discussion that we're pulling together so we can have a report for this town meeting. Well,
part of the discussion about the rebuilding of the Public Works barn over the years has been to get it out of the directly adjacent to the Great Meadow.
Sure.
And we buy Clark and Reed, which is even closer to the Great Meadow. Is that the ultimate destination, do you think, of DPW?
It may be. That's one of the options, you know. Right. So, you know, we've talked about DPW either in the Grant Ave area or there, and Grant Ave is posing, you know, land availability. We don't have land there. We have the state salt shed to work with.
Which was supposed to be sold to us for $1.
I hear all those stories,
right,
but I'm working in today's, you know, information,
right.
not in the bygone information, right. And so we're working on that. So the selectmen, you know, with various parties need to make a decision on that. So that's the project we're working on now.
Well, from your perspective, doesn't Grant Avenue make the most sense in terms of a centrally located barn for a community that relies essentially on commuter commerce?
So we, you know, from the staff perspective, yes. So when you know, you can ask John Sanchez the same question, me the same question, and yes, we know that's where we need to be. But then you always have to balance cost, availability, and you know, the options in that way, what to do. So we know, you know, that's where we would want to be. Just because we want to be there doesn't mean we're going to be there. Right. So that's what the selectmen are. You know, they know we want to be there. So they're working that issue right now.
Are there ongoing negotiations with the state in terms of acquisition of that land, or?
So the selectmen,
I think Tom Murray owns the adjacent garage area as well.
No, it's you know, so yeah, we've identified the property owners, and so the selectmen are working right now to make some decisions as to, you know, which avenues we're going to take here. So that's what I can say on that.
Okay, now what about the high school? The high school's 50 years old. Is that somewhere in the capital spending plan in terms of negotiations with the school committee as to a time frame?
Sure. So the school committee for the last several years has filed a grant request with the state for upgrades to the school building. And so there's a request in, you know, at this point in time. And the request basically is for some upgrades, and particularly with the HVAC system, you know, upgrading HVAC and some classrooms, I believe in the science wing. I'm not as versed in that. So we have set aside in the capital program, you know, the funds for those upgrades. It's upgrades of the building. The building's in good shape.
But it's not a rebuild. I mean, we've seen some of these monstrosities, $160 million.
Well, that's what it would be. So, you know, Bill Ricker is, you know, up to what, 170, I think, and that's after several cutbacks. You know,
cutbacks to 170.
To 170. I mean, you know, it's amazing what a high school will cost, you know, these days. So, you know, the town doesn't need to build a new high school. It would be certainly nice, but you know, when you look at, you know, what we need to build, and you got two, you know, elementary schools you got to take a look at, along with, again, we're talking fire station and public works facility, and you know, all these pieces. And then the whole thing with school building is getting the state assistance. Right. So, you know, if you can't get the state assistance, you're not building that school. No. I think Bill Ricker got almost $100 million out of that 170 from, you know, from the state. Right. So, you know, if
it would be nice to dress it up. It looks like a Gorbachev or a Khrushchev era building. I mean,
it was built in the 60s, 70s when that's what we built. I mean, you know, Yeah, so you can, it's funny how you can look at, infrastructure, buildings, and you can kind of guess when it was built based on, what it's looking like. And, the 70s was great for that, bombshell, look.
Well, we look at the Center School in 1933, circa 1933. It looks better from an appearance standpoint than built in 1971, I think.
You look at Boston City Hall, and
oh
we can get
God,
into that
good
discussion.
Lord, what a disaster that is.
See, I know how to take you off course here, so,
well,
the more I take you off course,
That's exactly what the issue is. I mean, that's a complete disaster.
Yeah.
They should sell that and knock it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we just had a discussion on that, but the amount of money that parcel could bring for them would certainly more than build a new city hall for them. All right, let's move on to money items. Let's go to the budgets.
Sure.
Classification is in, the budget's in. What are the numbers? Are you satisfied with the split? Are you satisfied with the increase, or should we have a decrease from a taxpayer?
Well, taxpayers always say that. I always say $1 tax money is always too much when you're
when you're paying it.
When you're paying it as a taxpayer, So, so that's what we look at. But, I'm always saying, well, what do you want for services? So I think I've been here, I've said this to you several times. I'm not going to talk to you about taxes. I'm first going to talk to you about services, because you have to tell me, what do you want?
Yeah, I want them all.
Yeah, exactly. What level of service do you want? And then we translate that into what a budget can look like and what's the impact of that. So if you want to cut taxes, to me the discussion is, okay, what do you want to cut for services? So that's really the discussion, that has to have. I think we do, the people in this town over the years, from when they set aside all the commercial sector, built the mall, built all the commercial sector, you look at the Burlington numbers, and we do the survey. We have a survey of our 13 area communities. You look at the numbers, Burlington's in the best shape, of the communities, around us. When you look at that, everybody knows, hopefully everybody knows that the tax dollar you pay in this town is a much better rate than many of our neighboring communities.
I've been in my house 40 years, and when I first bought it, I think my tax bill was $1,950. Now 40 years later, I'm paying $4,400. So I would think that somewhere in that calculation, I've made out okay, considering the fact that the thing is appreciated by 12-fold.
When you look at what you can sell your home for, in this community, and the fact that we don't do fees, so I think that's a huge factor, where we don't have trash fees, we don't have bus fees,
no
athletic fees, and your water rates are subsidized, by the tax, by the budget here. So the water rates you pay here are very low, the water sewer rate, and it could be higher if we did it as an enterprise account like many communities do.
Veteran Services, Recreation Department, Council on Aging.
Right. So I think we're in very good shape. So when you look at the numbers, you look at the condition, we're a AAA rated community, which is the highest you're going to
Only
get.
7 in the state, I think.
There's more than that, but it's, at this point. But, we're a AAA rated community. You look at where we are on free cash. We don't tax to the maximum 2.5. We're $8 million below our 2.5 levy limit. So you look at all those numbers.
10 million in stabilization, 8 million in free cash.
I can tell you, I sit with my fellow managers. They all look at me, and I start citing a few numbers, and they just tell me to shut up. Quit bragging about where you are as a community in Burlington, because we're in great shape.
All right, let me give you the difficult question, though. 8 years ago, we had a substantial downturn in property valuations, particularly on the commercial side, which resulted in a 24% shift of tax burden over to the residential. Are we in danger of that again, particularly since a good bit of this most recent development is on the retail side, which is always subject to substantial downturns in the economy?
The quick answer is, you're always in danger, because no one can predict what the future is going to be. But we've done a pretty good job in this town since then. We don't tax the businesses to the maximum, rate. So,
so you have room.
We have room to adjust in that area. So there's room in that area. What they've tried to do recently is diversify the businesses, in Burlington. so that if one sector, we all know the old mill communities,
Right.
you're tied to one business,
Sure.
that has trouble, your whole community has trouble. We've diversified. One of the things that we've done recently is with Millipore coming in.
Right.
We gave I'll call it a minor TIF. It wasn't a major
TIF, tax incentive
financing
agreement.
So it was 15%, on a tax bill, which wasn't major. But one of the things everybody looked at was that Millipore was a life science company, which we did not have in this community, and it is one of the largest in the world.
Sure.
And so the spinoff that would bring was having them come to town was a win-win.
Well,
for
let's
us.
segue into that. You give me a perfect segue. Why give tax incentive financing agreements? I mean, we've had people here that have been here for 50 years, been the largest taxpayers in the town.
Sure.
They don't get any tax break. Then we give a tax incentive financing agreement to essentially a company that lives next door. So how beneficial was it to the region for us to steal a company from Bedford and Billerica and give them a tax break to come to Burlington?
They weren't looking at staying in the region, so their options, they had an option in New Hampshire, versus here, and so we looked at those pieces. They wanted to be here, and so we worked with them. And again, 15%'s not a huge TIF, so that's what we discussed. So we weren't giving away the store. We've done basically 3 TIFs in this communities, that had any real money attached, and each of them had a reason for it. One was going back to the old Microsoft, the Sun, Microsystem Sun, Oracle now, and that transformed that area.
Right.
The second was Keurig, which helped kick off, and this we thought was, again, transformative because it brought a life science, business to town. Well, remains to be seen how that works because they haven't opened up yet, they're in the building process. But everybody thought that was really, the right way to go. And town meeting did approve that.
Fortunately, we've only got a few minutes left, so let's go to traffic. One of the benefits of one of the detriments to a great tax rate is the fact that certain times of the day you can't drive to certain parts of the town. Now, what have you got coming up for improvements, and then segue into the Route 128? We're trumpeting the fact that we get $700,000 to upgrade the 128 Route 3 intersection, which seems to be a drop in the bucket to cure a problem, which particularly during this time of the year, you can barely get off of 128 to get to the mall, to get to Mall Road.
Several things, since you're giving me only a couple minutes
left.
Yeah,
that's right.
So several things is, first of all, the fix is so huge that you can't even, wrap your brain around a fix because it's more highways. Because the problem is the 93 and 128 interchange, which backs up. So it's not, the problem doesn't start in Burlington, it ends in Burlington. So we're at the end. I think the adding the additional lanes in certain areas will move traffic a little bit better. We're about to begin the project on Middlesex Turnpike, because part of the TIF is we ended up getting a grant from the state.
On the Wheeler Road intersection?
On the Wheeler Road intersection. So even though we gave a TIF, we got that money back, from the state and a MassWorks grant, which will align all those roadways. The other major improvement is going to be this new interactive traffic light system that works with each other, which is federal money coming in.
So you don't hit a red light every 200 yards.
It learns from the traffic that's going on, and it alters itself, through the system, so that the lighting can change. Because a lot, you hit a traffic light and you can't get through. Well, the problem's 4 traffic lights down the road.
Right.
So
or you may have one car over here getting a green light, and you got 100 cars here that have got a red light.
Yep. So we constantly work on that whole piece. So I think traffic has improved, in the last couple of years with many of the projects that have already been completed. So it's not as bad in certain places, but we're still Burlington. And the problem, again, is it doesn't begin in Burlington. It begins, south of us, from Boston coming out, and it's
from Waltham west, to Woburn on the north side. Yeah.
So we don't start. The traffic doesn't back up in Burlington first. It backs up someplace else, and it ends up backing up into us.
Okay, I've only got 40 seconds left. Tell me that there isn't going to be a traffic light at the top of the Route 3A hill adjacent to the Duffy properties.
That is being determined, at this time. The planning board has said they would like to see a traffic like this, so That hasn't been a determination yet.
But
not that you have an opinion on
yeah,
that.
no, not that. Well, having sled down that hill 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
No, my God, it's almost 60 years ago at this point. Because traffic couldn't possibly get up that hill during the wintertime. It's hard for me to imagine that you're going to stop traffic down all the way to Dunkin' Donuts on that hill.
So.
But in any event, that's another country heard from. I want to thank our guest today, 2016 Year in Review with Town Administrator John Petrin. Thank you, very gracious with your time.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. I'm Phil Gallagher with John Petrin. Thank you for joining us.